Vegas projections are in on Miami's upcoming season, from everything to win totals to players' chances at individual awards. We discuss the odds in today's episode of Locked On Heat.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome to Locked On Heat, your daily podcast on the Miami Heat. Whether you're tuning in on YouTube or on your favorite podcast app, thanks so much for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. I'm Wes Goldberg here with David Ramil. Both of us are credentialed media members who cover this team every day. For daily content on the Heat, join more than 17,000 Heat fans and click that subscribe button on YouTube. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Have a great show for you today. We're looking at a bunch of FanDuel odds, including what Vegas thinks about Bam's chances to finally win Defensive Player of the Year, and a surprising Heat player with decent odds to win Most Improved. But let's start with Miami's win total. David, FanDuel has it set at 38.5 games. FanDuel has it set at 38.5 games. I repeated that twice because, you know, David, I'm usually not the they always disrespect us guy. And I know the Heat are coming off of a bad season. But damn it, David, this is downright disrespectful. 38.5 wins? Come on. Yeah. It's been 10 years since the Heat lost that many games in a regular season that wasn't blowtorched by Jimmy Butler. I know people roll their eyes at the Heat culture thing all the time, but there's something to having institutional pride. And I would go and there's a lot of reasons why I think the Heat are going to hit the over on this and why I think it's a lock for them to hit the over on this. But this organization, they're going to see that 38.5 win number and go over it just out of spite. Like, this is such a hard over for me. I cannot believe it is this low.
39 wins. You know, I mean, they'll definitely push it to that. Look, I think I can see the perspective of the odds makers on this, is that, yeah, the season was torpedoed by Jimmy Butler, but also you had Jimmy Butler on the team. And while I think you and I watched the team so closely to determine that Butler wasn't the kind of factor that he had been in years prior, I understand the idea is, well, you had Jimmy Butler on this team and you still only won X number of games, and then you were able to acquire basically the same roster, bring back the same roster for the second half of the season after the Butler trade, and guess what? He still didn't win that many games. So even with the addition of Norm Powell, I don't think that Vegas odds makers really believe that Powell can duplicate the idea of what Jimmy Butler provided last season for Miami during the brief time that he was here last year. So I think that's kind of how the logic works. At least that would be my guess. Having said all that, it's absolute BS. Like, this team is not going to win 38.5 games. They're significantly better than that. I think times there was real trauma about last season. They just didn't like the vibes there. It was really uncomfortable. And you need that to be able to win at a high level consistently in the NBA. I think another offseason, a chance at training camp, of building this team, of knowing exactly who you are, and yes, bringing in fresh blood like Powell and some other players here and there, I think will really renew this team's sense of focus. And I would say, honestly, that this team would probably be closer to 45 wins than they would 38.5.
So I'm doing over-unders for the entire league over at Real GM Radio, and me and Matt Moore, who also does Locked On NBA and Locked On Nuggets for us, we just ran through the Eastern Conference, and Matt puts together his projections. Like, I don't know what kind of fancy schmancy math and formulas and Excel stuff.
Spreadsheets.
All spreadsheets. But he said his projection has him closer to 47, 48 wins. So we're not alone on this, right? Yeah. No, I look at the Eastern Conference and I'm like, why are the Heat going to lose this many games in a weak Eastern Conference? But beyond all of that, I want to go back to that point that you said about moving on past the Jimmy Butler thing. I think that's such an underrated part of what will be the Heat story this year. I think what did you and I kept saying about this Heat team towards the end of last year? They lacked joy. That locker room was toxic. There was a cloud hanging over that entire team. They tried to ignore the Jimmy Butler issue until it exploded in their face. And eventually it just, I think it literally became untenable for the team that is, for the organization that says, we keep the main thing the main thing. They tried to keep the main thing for so long that I actually think it became a bug as opposed to a feature. It was at a detriment to the team because they weren't acknowledging the elephant in the room. That was Jimmy Butler's trade demand, and the way he was behaving around the organization. And they tried to put their head in the sand and ignore all of it, and it didn't work. And I think that they would have been better off maybe not doing it that way, maybe acknowledging it a little bit more than what was actually going on. That team needs that. Just moving on from Jimmy Butler wasn't enough to move past it in that moment. They needed a clear offseason. I think everybody needed to clear their heads. I think Bam needed to go to Greece. Erik Spoelstra needed to go touch sand. Kel'el Ware's in Egypt or something right now. Davion Mitchell's in Spain. Like all these, like everybody needed to get away, regroup, refresh, come back, and now I think you could start fresh. And the other thing I want to talk about too is with Bam, we talked about his recent comments about the roster and all these things. What he said about getting a full training camp and getting more connected, that is going to be huge. They were rebuilding the post-Jimmy Butler plane in midair. Now they get to actually take a look at themselves, put a plan together, and rebuild the strategy of this team, given what the roster is. But yeah, like you look at the Eastern Conference and where FanDuel has the over-under win totals for these other teams. They've got Cleveland at the top at 55.5, not surprising. The Knicks right behind them at 53.5, not surprising. Yep. Orlando at 50.5, not surprising, honestly. Atlanta at 46.5, and then you've got Detroit at 44.5, Boston at 42.5, Milwaukee at 42.5, Philadelphia at 41.5, Indiana at 38.5, and Miami at 38.5. I'm looking at some of those teams in front of Miami. You're really going to put Philadelphia over Miami? You're going to really put Boston? I know they're without Jason Tatum, but also remember, they traded Drew Holiday. They don't have Kristaps Porzingis. Their center rotation is Keita, Garza, and Tillman, which I just said 3 names, Heat fans. How many do you recognize? Like, it's... I can't believe that they're... Not the fact that they're behind him, but how far behind him even they are.
Yeah, I think... Look, we just went through this on Locked On NBA ourselves. Like we're ranking the top teams in each conference in descending order. So we went through the top 5 teams in the East just last week, and my co-host Jackson Gatlin of Locked On Rockets, he has the Celtics at the 5th spot on his rankings, and his I think he might have even had them at 4th if I'm not mistaken. Like
ahead of
his
Miami.
Belief is certainly ahead of Miami. He thinks that Joe Mazzulla is still going to be able to coach this group, that they're going to be able to get something out of that backcourt rotation with Peyton Pritchard and Derek White and stuff like that, so that they're still good enough, even with a loss of Tatum, to be able to find some balance there. And I'm just like, I don't know that I see that. Like Peyton Pritchard,
this is I know he's been the coach of the Celtics for a few years now. This is a new job. He's never had this job before.
Yeah,
he coached loaded rosters with championship expectations, and I'm not taking anything away from Mazzulla. He did a fantastic job coaching those teams, especially under the circumstances that he took over the team. I am not taking anything away from Mazzulla, but this is just a different job than he's had in the past.
You can't town your way past the loss of Jason Tatum and everything else, and the fact that you have no centers on the roster.
And back to Miami here. Look at the talent on their roster. Tyler Hero was an all-star last year. Bam is going to have a bounce-back season. Okay, we'll talk about Bam a little bit later in the show. He'll have a better year. He's going to be better this season. Kel'el Ware, fully coming into his own, starter from day one, or at least, a part of the rotation at minimum day one. We think he'll be a starter. You add Norm Powell. All the young players get better. I think you're going to get a bounce-back year from Jaime Jaquez Jr. You don't have the Jimmy Butler thing hanging over the team. I think this team is actually talented. I think that they're better as a roster than they were at the beginning of last year, knowing what we got from Jimmy Butler. I think this team is better than they were at the beginning of last year. I actually think this is a solid roster. They're not going to win 50 games. They're not going to win the championship. They're not going to win more than 2 playoff rounds. But they're going to win a hell of a lot more than 38 games. I know that.
The expectation then that the West is just going to be so much more dominant, that they're going to be able to take advantage and pad their win totals across the board. on the other side of the ledger, and then so that the East, they just can't compete with the West. Because I think, look, everybody wants to make it look like the West is so clearly dominant and everything else like that.
They are this year.
I really think that's overstated, to be
Well, because
100%
of the
honest.
injuries. I mean, come on.
Maybe, yeah, exactly. I mean, you've got
We just
at
lost.
least
We
two
lost
players.
Halliburton and Tatum. Yeah, I mean they're.
Yeah. So, I mean, is that maybe the idea here is that the West is just going to be able to,
No,
at least each
I think
team
it's
in the West is going
I'm
to be able to
actually
get a couple
surprised
wins?
because I think it's the opposite. There's so many bad teams in the Eastern Conference. You think even an average team like Miami would be able to, like, I think the win totals in
Pick
the
up a
East should
couple wins
actually
there.
be more inflated because
Well,
you've
who are the
got
worst teams in the East? Orlando,
Utah.
It's not Orlando. Well, no, in the East, I'm saying, who are the
in
worst
the
teams
East,
in the East?
Charlotte,
Washington.
Washington, Brooklyn.
Yeah,
Those teams are all going to win 20-ish games.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, I just
When is it going to be Charlotte's year? When are they going to finally turn this thing around?
it's not going to be this one.
Oh, when they get rid of LaMelo Ball, that's what.
Well, let's put a pin in this conversation. We mentioned Bam. What does Bam Adebayo have to do to win Defensive Player of the Year? He needs to have a bounce back season. But David, it's not all up to him. We'll talk about that next. Stay tuned.
Today's episode is brought to you by Open Phone. If you're running a business, you know that every missed call is money left on the table. Think about the last time you had an urgent need, maybe for a plumber or a service provider of some kind. If the first person didn't answer the phone, did you wait? Probably not. You moved on, and that's why you need Open Phone. Open Phone is the #1 business phone system built to streamline and scale your customer communications, all from an app on your phone or computer. Open Phone lets you manage business calls and texts from a single app. No juggling involved. The shared inbox feature is a game changer. Your team can jump into any conversation instantly without missing a beat, and their AI agent handles after-hour calls, answers common questions, and captures leads so you never miss a customer. Open Phone is offering my listeners 20% off your first 6 months at openphone.com/LockedOnNBA. That's OPENPHONE.com/LockedOnNBA. And if you have existing numbers with another service, Open Phone will port them over at no extra charge. Open Phone, no missed calls, no missed customers. We'll be right back.
Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Before we continue, we have an announcement. We are launching our 25 of 25 series where we rank the top 25 Heat players of the past 25 years. We're really excited for this project. We're going to start doing shows on our 25 of 25 next week. But before we start doing that, we need your help on deciding who those 25 players are. So to cast your vote, join the Locked On Heat Insider community, where we are sending the link to the survey every morning this week. Sign up with the link in the show notes, and then click the Google form that'll take you to the survey, and then you can make your vote on our 25 of 25 series, the best 25 players of the last 25 years. Do it now because voting ends on Friday night. Continuing on with our player awards here now. We got Defensive Player of the Year and Most Improved that I want to talk about, and then we're going to get to Coach of the Year as well. So we'll start with Defensive Player of the Year. Bam Adebayo on the list, not surprising. The favorite, according to FanDuel, is Victor Wembanyama, runaway favorite at -190. Okay, nobody else is in minus odds. It's Wemby, and it probably will be Wemby as long as he's healthy. But I do think that that's a big if, right? Wemby hasn't necessarily he's never been healthy enough to win this award.
Right.
So we'll see. But Chet is behind him at +600. And then you've got a bunch of guys until you get to Bam, who's at +5,000. All right. So some of the names in front of Bam, you've got Wembanyama, Holmgren, you got Evan Mobley, Amen Thompson, Anthony Davis, Dyson Daniels, who was a finalist last year, Jalen Suggs. Giannis is there at +4,000. Asar Thompson from Detroit at +5,000, tied with Bam at +5,000. Draymond Green also at +5,000 odds. Bam ahead of former Defensive Player of the Years, Jaren Jackson Jr. and Rudy Gobert. So this feels about right to me for where Bam's starting odds should be. Do you agree that this one is more fair than certainly the win total over under?
Yeah, it would take such a monumental effort for Bam to be recognized amongst the top defensive players in the league. Like that, I think that window has closed almost to a certain degree, and it's so unfortunate because again, we've made the point before that unless you're digging really deep into certain statistics there, to measure Bam's impact is so much more difficult to do. And shout out to Cooper Moorhead of Heat.com, who does a fantastic job of always laying out a very good statistical case to back up what we all can clearly see regarding Bam's defense. But I think the casual voter, in terms of how they view the Defensive Player of the Year chase, they just can't seem to understand Bam's impact because the statistics just don't bear it out. And it's, you get a Bam who averages barely over a block per game versus Victor Wembanyama, all 8 feet of him, and whether or not he can block those shots, etc. That's much easier to quantify. And so I look at Bam and how he stacks up against these other players, and a lot of it, and as you well know, has to do with narrative and just idea, belief, etc. Miami, a mediocre team with a player that has a reputation for being a great defender, and you can't really point to many statistics to back that up. What are you going to do? How are you going to vote for a player like that and feel justified in saying that Bam Adebayo is the best defensive player of the year versus somebody that you can clearly see, oh, wow, he just impacts X number of shots per game because of his overall superior length. They're winning. They're going to be winning a lot more games, maybe even as many as Miami next year, based on the fact that they've made some significant roster moves. So you look at a player like San Antonio, or a team like San Antonio versus a team like Miami, and I think there's going to be a lot more buzz about that Spurs group than whatever it is that Miami does. And I think, again, the regular season win projections kind of show that, is that, this is just going to be another lackluster team, pretty mediocre, etc. And so why justify, or why have to already give Bam increased chances? And now look, that can all change. I don't know what it would take, though. I honestly don't know what it would take for Bam to be able to leap into that conversation and get that start early in the year. Because again, it's so hard to measure what he can do.
Well, can I jump in here, because I want to push back on that. I don't know that the statistic. I don't think we are in a world, even with the media voting on Defensive Player of the Year, I don't think we live in that world of, do you get a lot of blocks and rebounds for Defensive Player of the Year anymore? I don't think we're there. Evan Mobley won it last year. He wasn't getting a ton of blocks and a ton of rebounds. Like, you look across, like Marcus Smart actually won it, which was more of a narrative case.
But Mobley won the team with the most wins in the NBA.
Well, there's a narrative case for that, and I do think we're 100. I think this is the most. This is probably the second most narrative based award. This might be. It's top 3, but
Smart certainly fits in that category.
That was a narrative vote from 100%. I will go so far as to say Marcus Smart did not deserve Defensive Player of the Year. He didn't deserve to be a 100%. Finalist for that award.
I don't think he was the best defender on that team.
No, he was. He literally wasn't. The Boston Celtics the team was pushing Robert Williams III for Defensive Player of the Year, and then he got hurt, and then they just just scratched out his name on everything and replaced it with Marcus Smart, and they said, how about this? And everybody's like, yeah, sounds good. I still have no freaking clue how Marcus Smart won Defensive Player. It's crazy to me. He won it for guards everywhere. I'm sorry, guards are smaller than than centers. I'm sorry that you're an NBA player making millions of dollars and you can't win Defensive Player of the Year. Wah. It's the bigger players are the better defensive players. It's just how it works, okay? It's a league that self-selects for size. This is how it works. Anyway, I feel like I have to do one of those rants once a month.
Love it.
But I will say, for somebody like Nikola Jokic, who his counting stats now are out of this galaxy, literally just off charts. But there was a point where we were trying to capture Jokic's value with advanced stats, on-off metrics, all of these things. And we did that. Like, people fully understood how great Jokic was. And we do that now with Defensive Player of the Year. Rudy Gobert has won it 4 times. And a lot of that is because of the block numbers, but a lot of it also is just because his crazy on-off numbers. If Bam were to have the crazy on-off numbers, we're doing it now with Victor Wembanyama as well. If he were to have those kinds of on-off numbers, where when Bam is on, Miami's defense is number 1 by a lot, he's in the mix. And by the way, that's why he's been a finalist. It's not as if he's overlooked for this. He has been a finalist for this award multiple times. He's just ultimately lost out to somebody else, I think, because of the narrative part. So what would it take for Bam to win Defensive Player of the Year? It's going to take a strong season from him on both sides of the court. For some reason, the offensive side of the basketball will matter for Bam when it comes to Defensive Player of the Year. I know that sounds crazy, but that's how you become relevant. And Bam was irrelevant for all of last season on a national perspective. And that's why he didn't even make an all-defensive team, although I couldn't tell you 10 better defenders than Bam in the league last year. But he didn't make all-defensive team because he was irrelevant. So you need to be relevant, and you do that by having a strong overall season as a basketball player and your team being good. And if the Heat win, I think, if we want to get specific, if they win 48 games, so basically come in 10 wins over their projection. If they win 48 games, are a top 4 seed in the Eastern Conference, and are top 5 in overall defensive rating, Bam will be a finalist again for this award, I think.
I don't know about finalists. It feels just like 50+ win team. Again, to kind of get that idea and yes, meet all the other criteria that you just laid out as well. Because then that's when you're really talking. It's like, oh wow, that Heat team that, somehow nobody expected to win is suddenly winning a lot more games. It has to be for X reason. And I think, again, and then you start watching the team a little bit more, you get a couple more national televised games. And I think that really starts to change the idea that, again, that story, it feels a little bit more justifiable in saying they're better for a reason. And one of the reasons that you look to is their defense. If they meet that criteria, as you said, of being a top.
I don't think they need to win 50. I don't think they need to be at the top of the East. I think if they have home court advantage,
No,
in the
that
first
top
round.
East, it has to be, again, second. If you're close to Cleveland, and I don't think it's so impossible. We're saying, like, the argument is, does this feel right or appropriate for where Bam is? And I think it is. Like, I mean, is Bam a better defender than Asar Thompson? I think so.
Right now,
I think so. Yeah. I think he was a better defender than Jaren Jackson. I think he's as impactful. I honestly think he's as impactful a defender as Victor Wembanyama. And I
think he's better than Mobley, who won it last year.
Yeah, I agree. So I still see him as a top 5 defender, and I think he's better than Giannis too.
And I think most people see him. I think Bam has that reputation in the league, obviously, as one of the best defenders in the NBA. I think I think the bar, this isn't Bam trying to crack into the conversation. It's just Bam trying to get back into the conversation. Bam left the conversation, went to the bar, grabbed a drink, and now he's just trying to work his way back. And he's just trying to catch up on, what are we talking about now?
Well, they're talking about something completely different. And that's the whole thing. It's like
but everybody knows him, and they'll let him back in.
Yeah, but in order to get recognized again, he'd have to come in there with like the joke of the night or something like that.
No,
just like
I don't think so. I don't think. I think he could just come in here with a softball, just like, hey, what's going on, guys?
No,
he's got that reputation.
The reputation was there 5 years ago when he was clearly better than Marcus goddamn Smart.
But he was a finalist. I'm just saying to be a finalist.
Okay,
again.
finalist. Okay, maybe you're right. All right,
just to be on the ballot here, And then once you're a finalist, you have a chance to win it. Just to get back into that finalist conversation.
I never believed it. I wish I.
Well, you and I didn't think he was actually going to win it, but he was at least a finalist. So to win it, maybe to your point, to win the thing, it'll take a pretty big season from him. It'll take and by the way, playing and the team obviously, but playing power forward now could unlock new levels of block numbers as a weak side help defender. If he's just chasing guys down and blocking them at the rim as that help side recovery defender, he can rack up another couple blocks here and there. Next thing you know, he's averaging 1.5 blocks per game. That's something, and that's a big deal for Bam. Everybody's like, oh, he added this extra thing, and even though he didn't really add it, even though maybe he did add it, I don't know. But he'd be playing a different position, and that would be mostly the reason why. So maybe there's something there that could help him with the narrative. But all right, we're going to move on to some other awards. FanDuel is giving a couple of young Heat players a real chance at winning Most Improved. We'll talk about that and whether Erik Spoelstra can finally win Coach of the Year after this. Stay tuned.
Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Have you ever decided at the last minute to head to a ball game with friends or family? Well, maybe it's a game day. You suddenly realize you want to be in the stands. And that's exactly where Game Time comes in. It's the easiest way to grab last-minute tickets without the stress. With the money you save on tickets, you could splurge on food, drinks, merchandise, maybe even invite a bigger group to come enjoy the game with you. Game Time makes that and much more possible. Game Time makes buying tickets fast and simple. Prices on the app actually drop the closer you get to first pitch, and they've got incredible last-minute deals, clear seat views, and a lowest price guarantee that takes the worry out of buying. Look, that's just the way it works in today's life. You know, you're busy. Maybe you get out of work a little bit earlier. Maybe traffic is a little bit less, intense than it can be. And you say, you know what? I happen to have a little bit more time on my hands. Let me go catch these Marlins that I've been hearing so much about. Guess what? That's when you download the Game Time app. You find the seats that you're looking for in the range that you can afford, and you get to see exactly where you're going to be sitting there. You're going to have a great view at Marlins Park there. You're going to love it, and you get $20 off because right now you can take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. If you download the Game Time app and create an account and use the code LOCKEDONNBA, you get $20 off your first purchase. Now, terms do apply, but create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONBA, I should say, for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. We'll be right back.
All right, let's talk about most improved. So, according to FanDuel, we've got two guys who are favorites for most improved at plus 1,000 odds. So it's not a clear favorite, so it's worth mentioning here. But it's Denny Avdia from Portland, and then Indiana's Andrew Nemhard are the most. By the way, this is such a crapshoot at this point. Who freaking knows? Yeah, but I kind of like Nemhard for it. He's going to get way more touches with Halliburton now. Anyway,
that's what it is. Yeah, that's what it is.
That's what this is. You got other guys on the list: Amen Thompson, Scoot Henderson, Shaden Sharp. They're really pushing the Portland narrative here. They think that Portland, I guess, is just going to be good, and that somebody among them will emerge as the most improved. Not a bad strategy. I don't know that, like, just in terms of like riding a team. I don't know that Portland would be that team, but interesting.
Well, they outdid expectations last year, and I think the idea is they're only going to get better despite the trade assignments. I don't know how much does Drew Holiday have left in the tank, and how much is he going to really impact that team's culture. So
I'm starting to short Portland a little bit. I think they're super overrated offseason. They got some Detroit players, Jaden Ivey, which seems like a cheat. Like, he played 10 games last year or whatever because he was hurt. Like, can you really be most improved when you're coming back from an injury? That doesn't seem right. I like Jaden Ivey. I
like the comeback player of the year award. Do you remember that one? They
got rid of it. Yeah.
I don't know.
Asar Thompson, that's a nice bet. I like him a lot. Anyway, Nikola Jovic is on this list in the top 20, according to FanDuel, at plus 3,500. So it's a pretty fair distance, but like Asar Thompson at plus 2,500, Jane Ivey at plus 2,000, like Nikola Jovic is at plus 3,500. It's far away, but not like off the board. He's in the top 20 in odds. I found that interesting. Davion Mitchell, right behind him at plus 4,000, just outside the top 20. Are you surprised to see Nico? I mean, 19th isn't super high on the list, but it's pretty high on the list.
Yeah, I think, again, you look at some of the criteria. It's a player who was coming on strong and then succumbed to injury and missed some time there. And so the idea is he'll get some playing time. Again, I think the team is going to have a greater sense of their identity. They're going to have a greater purpose, their understanding of exactly what it's going to be required of each player. So I think that is going to lend itself to the idea that Nico could come in and make an impact. And I mean, you've made the point before that you could see him even perhaps emerging as a potential starter or getting the bulk of the minutes too. So that being the case, yeah, I could see that. I mean, if he's coming off the bench, I wouldn't be surprised to see him maybe even as a 6th man of the year candidate down the road. I think that's
we did the show 2 weeks ago on whether or not he can be Miami's version of a Naz Reid. If he is,
yes,
he's in the running for this and 6th man of the year, to your point. Davion Mitchell, he ends the year strong after getting traded over from Toronto. That's also kind of the guy. They kind of, this award is kind of won in the second half of the prior year.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's why you have guys like Denny and Nemhard and Amen Thompson very high on this list. You start laying your campaign in the second half of the previous season. Davion Mitchell definitely did that, so it's not surprising to see him kind of flirting around the top 20 of this list either.
But isn't it like most improved typically almost like player who was really good and it just turned into like star level player?
That's the problem. That's what it's become lately.
That's usually ridiculous. The criteria.
That's why I kind of
who won it last year? Because I know Zubac was certainly in the running. Who was it? And you made a case for Hero too. Like I think that was certainly a good case too.
I forgot who won it. It was like Maxey a couple of years ago. John Morant has won this. It's ridiculous. Let's talk about Coach of the Year though. Spose never won it. Erik Spoelstra has never won Coach of the Year. I think it's absolutely crazy. I've done big things and monologues on, whether or not he should have deserved it, what year he actually should have won it. There was a year where Tom Thibodeau won it, where I think Spo should have won it. Anyway, he's in the top 12. According to FanDuel right now. He's tied with JJ Redick at plus 3,000. And if JJ Redick wins a Coach of the Year before Erik Spoelstra, I'm gonna lead a mutiny. Like that's it's crazy. But Jamal Mosley is at the top at plus 400. The Orlando Magic head coach. Quinn Snyder's behind him at plus 500. David Adelman, the new Nuggets head coach, at plus 800. Ime Udoka at plus 850, and then Mitch Johnson, who's the coach of the Spurs, taking over for Greg Popovich, was the interim coach last year, at plus 1,000. That's your top 5. This, to me, just looking at the names and the order that they're in, like Darko Rajakovic, the Raptors coach, is at plus 1,500 over Erik Spoelstra, twice as good odds as Spo at plus 3,000. I think FanDuel just threw a bunch of darts at a board and just says, this is the order we're going to go in. Like, none of this makes any sense to me. No disrespect to guys like Jamal Mosley and Quinn Snyder, but like, come on, what are we doing here? It's... I can actually see Mosley being in the running for this if the Magic win 50 games, which I think their over-under is at 50.5, so that makes sense. And this makes sense also when you consider that FanDuel has Miami's over-under at 38.5 wins. It's actually kind of remarkable that Spo's even this high on the list, considering they think that the Heat aren't even going to be a 500 basketball team. I shouldn't say that's not what FanDuel is saying. They're trying to get betting on both sides of the over-under. Anyway, I think, David, going into the year, I don't know that Erik Spoelstra has ever had a better red carpet leading into a season to prime him for winning Coach of the Year than he does right now. I think the circumstances are finally perfect for Erik Spoelstra. Because if you think about the Big Three era, he was never going to win it. Because that team was loaded with talent and we were too stupid to figure that part of it out. You look after that, the teams just weren't good enough. You have that year where they actually kind of made it within a game of the Eastern Conference Finals, playing Justice Winslow at center and stuff, and then everybody started to realize, oh wow, this Spo guy really can make the most out of nothing, huh? And that's sort of where it's this version of the way we look at Erik Spoelstra started. And then you gotta go in the Jimmy Butler era, and there was only one year where they were the number 1 team in the Eastern Conference. I think he had a legit case to win Coach of the Year that year. Did not win it. But even those teams were, the narrative around those teams, the Jimmy Butler era teams, were what? That they didn't care about the regular season and that they were going to take care of business in the playoffs. And that's why a lot of these players and coaches, and why Erik Spoelstra never won these regular season awards, is because that narrative around the team was there, rightly or wrongly. But right now, this coach, we talked about narrative awards. Coach of the Year is the biggest narrative award because there are no stats other than wins and losses. And unless you're the Steve Kerr coaching the 73-9 Warriors, nobody's stats are like that much crazier than anybody else's. You know what I mean? You got one column for wins, one column for losses. There are no advanced metrics. So for Spo, as long as he just goes way over the projection here, I think he has a real chance to exceed expectations. And the number one narrative case for winning Coach of the Year is, did your team exceed expectations? And it is such a BS thing, and it's why Spo has never won this thing. But he finally has a chance because expectations are so low, and you and I believe that this Heat team can come in 10 wins over their potential projection here. And if that's the case, Spo will definitely at least be a finalist for this award. I don't think he's ever had a better case potentially going into a season than he does right now to finally win Coach of the Year.
Yeah, this is the lowest the floor on this team has been over the, I don't know how many years he's been a head coach with the Miami Heat now. Is this going on his 17th season?
Yeah, this is the lowest floor since the year LeBron left.
No, even then you had Dwayne
That's true.
Wade
You re-signed
and
Chris Bosh and you had
Luol
Dwayne Wade back.
Deng.
You're right.
Yeah,
You're right.
I mean, that group was still projected as a top 4-ish team in the Eastern Conference.
You're right. You're right.
So this is well, I don't think this team is going to be any good at all. They're probably going to be mediocre. If anything, you could even make the argument they're getting 38 wins projected because of Erik Spoelstra, that this might be like a 25-ish win team that somehow is going to eke out a 13 more wins. And as a result, if they do eclipse that mark by 10 more wins, he certainly would be deserving. I just it's an interesting point, and one I hadn't considered is that, you know what, right now nobody views this team as anything. They're not viewed as a playoff contender. They're certainly not viewed as a title contender. They're just kind of one of those teams in the Eastern Conference that might do something, but not anything of note. And so if Erik Spoelstra can put them in that position, even more so than Bam, I think he has a pretty good case to be made that he can coach this team to another level. And look, I mean,
that's an interesting case. That's an interesting question. Who of all the players and things that we just, how would you rank? Maybe we end the show with this because we're starting to run out of time. We talked about the win total, Bam, most improved, coach of the year. How would you rank those in terms of likelihood? To me, I would go win total as the most likely to go over, and then I would go Spo winning coach of the year, then probably Bam defensive player of the year, and then most improved after that.
Yep, same order, and I think it makes a lot of sense that way because again, the narrative discussion ties so much to wins. You made the point about, you know, for a coach, how else do you analyze what they've been able to do statistically? It just boils down to wins and losses. So you can't measure, you know, more UCLA's run per practice or, you know, more ATO sets or anything like that. It's like, how do you quantify it? So yeah, it's a good case.
Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen today. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.